What's going on, guys? Apathetic here, and today I'm going to be covering some tips on how to play Stormcaller, and specifically top tree Stormcaller. And initially, I'm not gonna lie guys, I wasn't a big fan of Stormcaller, but my friends on console persuaded me through my comments to give it another try. And I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed the gameplay, and I decided to share some tips and learns I've had while playing the subclass. Let's get into it. Tip number one for using Stormcaller is going to be pairing it with the exotic that's going to allow us to maximize our abilities. I know this may sound simple, but you got people like me out there that don't take off transversive steps no matter what. Now, the exotic I'm thinking of is Crown of Tempest, and this exotic allows us to really reduce our cooldowns of our abilities and super. With Crown of Tempest, I felt like I always had my grenade ready, which is a key part, I feel, of using top tree Stormcaller because of our ability Arc Web. And I know we've all been there on the other side of an arc grenade and it just keeps chaining, and with 3 or 4 kills or leaving a lot of the enemy team weak. Now, if you wanted to further enhance this idea of having your grenade more often, you could also use some ordnance mods, but I wouldn't recommend that too highly right now with Shadowkeep coming out. You're going to want to preserve your resources for that new armor. Tip 2 is mastering Ionic Blink. Ionic Blink is a secondary trait you can use when in your Stormcaller super that supports our ability to stay alive, since Stormcaller is one of the easier classes to kill out of super. And the second piece that Ionic Blink allows us to do is to create misdirection for our opponents and rack up more kills. One of the ways we can use Ionic Blink more effectively is to use it to get vertical. By using Ionic Blink to blink above your enemies, this can in some cases take you out of their field of view, and not only can they not shoot you, but also it's harder for them to track where you are. Now, what I like to do is not only get vertical with my Ionic Blink, but to also use it to blink up and behind my enemies, and as I'm falling down, I use my primary attack to electrocute them. I found this to be most effective because it's very hard for your enemy to track exactly where you went, and by the time they get turning around, they are already being killed by your super, and allows me to take minimal damage. Now, before I continue, it's super important that when using Stormcaller, you don't want to pop the super right on top of someone unless you're using bottom tree with landfall. The reason is because I found it can be very hard to track your enemies when you're that close to them, and in this super it can be somewhat easily killed if you have 2 or 3 guys with shotguns super close to you. And this ties into my next point, which is using Ionic Blink to create space. This is especially useful when you're in a super fight against a Spectral Blades or everyone's favorite Striker Titan, but we need to also balance how often we use it in order to balance the longevity of our super. So you only want to try to use it to create space between you and your opponent, or when you're trying to close the gap and create some misdirection to get close enough to do some damage. Tip 3 is a 2-parter, and that's going to be use the Arc Bolt Grenade when using top tree Stormcaller. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of pulse nades and storm grenades as well, but Arc Bolt allows us to really tap into that arc web effect of this particular subclass tree. Because Arc Bolt has such a great radius for striking enemies, it sets us up best to trigger the Chain Lightning perk, and while any of these grenades can trigger this perk, it's especially potent on Arc Bolt, again because of that increased radius, and it typically has a high chance of hitting more people, or even at least one person, and that's all we really need to get that Arc Web going. Now, the second part of this is focusing on using your Arc Bolt Grenade when we know it's likely that there are multiple enemies next to each other. So typically this is going to be on a capture point, when your enemy is just coming out of spawn, or when heavy has almost spawned. So for me, I try to use my Arc Bolt Grenade very early in the match when the enemy is funneling out of one of the common spawn areas. I do this because I know the chance of there being a good group of people together is high since the game just started, and the enemy team can only go so many ways after they initially spawn. This will allow us to maximize the usage of Arc Bolt Grenade, and in combination with Crown of Tempest, could potentially give us another grenade instantly. So remember guys, if you're trying to master Stormcaller, make sure you pair it with the optimal exotic, master Ionic Blink, and abuse that Arc Bolt Grenade. And let me know in the comments which tree of Stormcaller do you guys prefer most. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe.
1 minute left. Impressive, Guardian. You have an instinct for battle.